I was covering the email report coming out for Hunter Biden, basically corroborating that's if the emails themselves find themselves to be legitimate. I mean, keep in mind, even though there's apparently a sex tape and evidence of Hunter Biden doing coke on film, we don't entirely know as a flat fact. And like I said in my first video, the means by which this was obtained was weird at best, bizarre at least. And so you have to take it with a grain of salt. I thought it was a political operation. I still think it was a political op. Whether the documents themselves, however, are legit, that's something different. Those docs could be legit. They were summarily dismissed. So much so that Facebook and Twitter blocked for Biden. They basically threw their body at, pay no attention to this. Don't look at this. It's amazing. You can investigate Trump to the hilt. You can investigate Trump over anything. It doesn't matter how trivial, people would believe it and they would throw it out there. The media would. But on this, they said, we don't accept this type of information, going so far as to basically say we don't accept leaked data. Think about that. Snowden leaks, WikiLeaks, the leaks that were going to the Intercept showing the drone strikes. I mean, think of all the information, the Trump's taxes that come out in the form of leaks. And WikiLeaks, even though they're arguing this policy goes back to 2018, had no issue with showing leaked documents of Trump's tax returns. And I'll damn well tell you this, Trump didn't want that stuff out. Make up your mind. It looks selective. And if it indeed looks selective, when these guys are making the point of saying this is a publisher, you're acting like a publisher. You're not acting like somebody who's a billboard. You're basically picking and choosing. And while you do have leverage to pick and choose, it looks like you're picking and choosing in a way that's hurting one candidate while helping the other. And I would even say the debates is another example of this. Donald Trump, how are you going to change the debate rules with one participant saying, I disagree? Meaning, if you and I decide to get into a boxing match, the first match goes a particular way, you don't like it. And then the second match, you just say, okay, we're just going to change the rules. How do you do that? How do you do that? If the president can show that he is COVID-free and he can deposit himself on the debate stage, if you need to put them back further apart, do that. But the notion that the American public is not going to get their opportunity to see this theater is appalling. Because at the very least, you want the theater to take place. At some point, I hope that there will be a renewal. And it feels like our job is just to keep the theater going. So when the renewal takes place, the edifice is still there, even if it's hollowed out. And so, yeah, if it's going to fall, if the empire is collapsing, I want to at the very least get a good front row seat at the theater of these two fighting it out. But just from the standpoint of government in and of itself, they should debate. The town hall thing, it's a fail. And it's a fail on a few points, even from the standpoint of this notion that your candidates can't even come to an agreement where they can stand on stage together to have a debate. That is problematic, to put it mildly. But Donald Trump spoke about the documents from Hunter Biden. Now, keep in mind, Biden stood on stage and bragged that he got a prosecutor fired and held money to extort the firing of that prosecutor, the state prosecutor. The state prosecutor basically said, yeah, I was going to look into Burisma. The documents that they found basically made the connections, basically showed that, yeah, Biden was lying when he said that he didn't talk to his son about Burisma. Again, son on the board. But the documents in the email makes it clear they did speak. And then later on, you find him being requested assistance by executive that he met earlier. And in this case, you get Biden firing that particular prosecutor. Now, I'm going to let you hear Trump hear it, because Trump is now hammering this very specific story. So you have information coming out about Hillary Clinton. That's assuming that he goes through with releasing the documents. D.N.I. Radcliffe gave him enough, I suppose, leeway to do so. And now you have him hitting and pounding this very specific issue that magically appeared in the hands of a repairman that had the wherewithal to check it, figure out what was in it, and communicate it to authorities so they can get their hands on it, with making a copy so they can get to Giuliani. I don't believe for one moment that this was magically just, what is serendipity, just showed up. I don't buy that for a moment. I believe this was a political operation to get this information to the hands of the public without having anybody's fingerprints on it. And they had the information for a while. That's assuming that the documents in and of themselves are legit and real. But it does line up with rational behavior, what you would think. I mean, he's getting all of this money for what? It's not for his knowledge of the Ukraine. It's not for his knowledge of gas. It's for his influence. His dad is a viceroy because his dad is a viceroy. That's worth $80,000 a month, or how much ever he was getting paid. I'm gonna let you hear Trump's go at this, because he is a showman, and you watch him and you think to yourself, wow, he's in his element. This is his thing. You also notice that all these people have masks on behind them, or many of them, or most of them. So good on you guys for not following the president's example. Let's take a flip of this over. But the president of the United States makes his comments on the bombshell story about Joe Biden and, let's call it, corruption with his son. Welcome to the soapbox. My name is Jamarl Thomas. This is the Progressive Soapbox. Guys, if you dig this content, please like, share, and subscribe. You can always support this content through PayPal or, for that matter, Patreon. This content is brought to you by you, and I appreciate you for the opportunity to allow me to do it. Like I said, we've been trying to re-ramp up the show. This is after hospitalization. My wife reminded me yesterday it was only a month. I keep saying this, like 2 months or 2.5 or 3 months. Yeah, it's a lot sooner than what I thought it was. But nevertheless, we're ramping up the content to get it back to normal. This video, Trump did an amazing job of articulating this. And look, if this was any other election season or cycle, they would have to deal with this. But because of this cycle, and because it's Trump, and Trump is such an ogre, and if he wins, it's such a distribution of power change. Meaning, if Trump wins, most likely the Democrats are not going to keep the House. So you're going to end up with Trump, president, Republican Senate, Republican House, and of course, Republican Supreme Court. If anyone else gets ill, Trump gets additional picks. So he may end up getting 2 additional picks on that court. He already has 3. Can you imagine him with 5? But let's hear him make his case. Let's hear him make his argument. Whether or not this works, who knows? But let's hear him try.
We've just learned through explosive documents published by a very fine newspaper, the New York Post, that Joe Biden has been blatantly lying about his involvement in his son's corrupt business dealings. And this is a big smoking gun. The newly uncovered emails reveal that a top executive from the highly questionable Ukrainian company, it's an energy company, which paid Hunter at least $50,000 a month, but it's now looking like it could be $183,000 a month. That's a lot of money. Would anybody in this audience take it? I'll take it. We'll take it. Despite the fact that he had absolutely no experience, knew nothing about energy, wrote to Hunter arranging for a meeting to meet with Vice President Joe Biden. I've been saying this for a long time with that family. The same Ukrainian energy executive even sent Hunter an email saying, quote, "We urgently need your advice on how you could use your influence." In other words, Hunter was being paid for access to his vice president father, who was specifically put in charge of Ukraine and Russia. How about the Russia hoax? It turned out that they were the ones that did the Russia hoax. It was them. No collusion. No collusion. These emails show that Biden's repeated claim that he has never spoken to Hunter about his business dealings were a complete lie. It was a total lie. He lied to you over and over because he's trying to cover up a massive pay-for-play scandal at the heart of his vice presidency, and everybody knows it. Everybody in Washington knows it. We've known it for a long time. The fact is, there was never an administration more corrupt than the Obama-Biden administration. There was never. Just weeks ago, Joe stood before the American people in a presidential debate and told you that these claims had been totally discredited and that his son did nothing wrong. But now that turns out to be a total lie.
Now, the question becomes, does this have legs? Meaning, does this resonate? Does this hit with any force that changes anything? See, I think the problem is Donald Trump, I don't think he fundamentally understands why he's losing this race, at least from my perception of it. I could be wrong. Don't misunderstand me. But you getting Joe Biden in the debate to attack his base over and over and over again is not going to get his base, who's battered and broken, to not vote for Joe Biden. Meaning, they're going to vote for Joe Biden anyway because they're not voting for Joe Biden out of any kind of aspirational stuff. It's not the same thing. Whereas Trump backs his base in regards to the things that he says. He supports his base in regards to rhetoric, and sometimes indeed, if he can get away with it without costing anything. Democrats don't do that. And so it's a fundamental breakdown in regards to the way he's understanding the two-party system. Whereas he's backing his base, the Democratic Party doesn't give a shit about its base. And so his attacks on Biden to get him to continuously attack his base, yes, you succeeded in what you wanted to do. No, it doesn't get you the bang for the buck that you need. In this very specific case, with the information coming out, well, the same question applies. Does this give him the bang for the buck? The catch is, people who are voting Democrat, I don't think care about this. Listen to what I'm saying. People who are voting Democrat and who are terrified of you because they think you are a monster that's about to destroy America will listen to this and they would dismiss it, A, because you lie so much, or beyond dismissing it because you lie so much, will look at it and honestly not care. And they would say beating Trump is far more important than any of this stuff, even if this stuff is true. And I think most and many would not even consider it true. They would see their Washington Post, and the Washington Post would dismiss something that Joe Biden clearly said he did, and they would be okay with that. They would be comforted by that. They would sit in their chair, they would read their Washington Post, and say, oh, Washington Post said that's not true, so the world is great. Now, the catch is it true? And no, any honest appraisal shouldn't summarily dismiss something that Joe Biden literally did in regards to pushing to get the guy fired. Unless, at the very least, Joe Biden said he did. And up until this point, it was understood that this took place over months, not necessarily over the course of several hours in the way that Joe Biden said it took place, meaning he was even lying about that. Yeah, it looks sleazy. It stinks. I mean, this is not the first time that Joe Biden and Hunter Biden had this kind of scheming in place where one was in Congress and the other one was in the credit card industry, and you have laws that were passed that benefited the industry. Biden Inc. People like to call it soft corruption. It's just corruption. I mean, they call it what it is. People are trying to compare it to Trump. Why are you comparing it to anybody? Corruption is corruption is corruption. It just is what it is what it is. Stop trying to pretend that it's not what it is. In this very specific case, if these documents are true, yeah, they're bombshell if they're true. Joe Biden has been lying the entire time. I don't know why anybody believed him on that. It's his son. His son is working for a company, board of a company. The company is one of a massive company in the Ukraine, massively corrupt also. And he's the viceroy of the Ukraine. But they never talked about it. Never spoke about it at all. Does it make sense to you? logically. Don't get me wrong. How these documents came about and everything else are bizarre and weird. And I don't believe for a moment it was a natural development. By the same token, the question of whether or not the documents are true or not is secondary. It's the point. It's the primary point, not how you got the documents. And in this case, they are hammering away at it. You're going to get a fracturing. You're going to get part of the country that believes what Trump is saying here, and you're going to get part that believes what the Washington Post says. And that bifurcation is not necessarily going to change the results of what's taking place. At least in my appraisal, I could be entirely wrong. But Democrats are not going to investigate this. They're not going to touch this. Republicans are going to keep hammering away at it. But where do you get where you're pulling votes? And that's the part that I don't see take place. But that said, I'm one of those people that believes, yeah, this makes sense. It was influence peddling. Why else would Hunter Biden be there? And look, if you read through the documents yourself, you can see how this notion of, hey, here's my dad. I want to introduce you to my dad. And then beyond the introduce you to my dad, okay, now I need a favor. Within this context, within the political situation, gets involved. Yeah, the emails are damning. We just need to figure out whether the emails are true. And if they are, as sad as it sounds, nothing would take place, even if they are validated. God himself could come down and say, these emails are completely true and they're exactly what they look like. Nobody would care. I'm sorry, not nobody. Only a segment of the political space would care. It's so sad. So sad. I'll end this here. Trump was hammering on that. In fact, let's hear a little bit more because he's not finished. I don't think he's going to let up.
Now we can see clearly that Biden is a corrupt politician who shouldn't even be allowed to run for the presidency. I was pressing Joe Biden to tell the truth because the corrupt lamestream media right back there, all those cameras right back there, they're corrupt and they refuse to write the story. There wasn't one time in almost 4 years during my presidency, during the greatest political scandal in U.S. history, a witch hunt, a horrible, horrible, disgusting witch hunt that should never, ever happen to another presidency again, and people should pay for the crimes they committed. Which turned out to be a total illegal hoax that false and libelous stories every day, false and libelous stories, and they knew they were false too. They knew they were false. They were never taken down by Twitter or Facebook or the mainstream media, never once. Yet with Biden today, they take negative posts down almost before they even go up.
Yes, again, that's true. That's exactly what they did. They attacked him relentlessly. That's kind of my point. Anything from the Steele dossier, all of these things were found to be basically for naught. One nothing burger after the next. You would have nothing coming up from Mueller reports. And yet the Democrats still scream about it. And the wild part about it is even the links when they get prosecuted, like Roger Stone getting prosecuted, is indicative of Russiagate not being real, because Roger Stone was supposed to be the link between those two things. He was not. There was no link. And Assange has continuously asserted Russia was not the origination of those documents. And I gotta be honest, it makes more sense that this was a leak, not necessarily a hack. So Trump is making the point that these guys assaulted me with this scam. And then you have Brennan in that document, his own writing, basically saying, released by DNI Radcliffe, basically saying that, look, Hillary Clinton is going to assault Donald Trump with this Russia stuff, and express concern over the fact that she was planning to do that. And that's exactly what took place. That's exactly what they did. And in regards to the politics of it all, she was able to basically wrap his hands with this particular storyline for years. I mean, think back. Over that time frame, Donald Trump was boxed in regards to what he could do in that office because of the attacks by Democrats. And even if he came into that office wanting to be conciliatory with another nuclear power, he couldn't do it. He had to become more hawkish in order to look as if he is not acquiescing to Russia, or that he is not a Putin or robot of Vladimir Putin. I mean, this is the stuff that he had to do in order to just function in that office. All of it because of the attacks that were placed by this notion of Trump and Russia. And so him being a bit bitter, I can understand why. I can understand why. And the way that they are all of a sudden, oh, we don't like leaks, we don't like leaks. They didn't care about leaks when they were attacking him. Look, he has a point. He could be an ogre. You could think he is the end of all things. You could think, he's a monster or whatever else you want to call him. I think he's a horrible, horrible human being, but horrible human beings also, at times, are right. And this is one of those times where I actually do think he's right. I think it's appalling that Twitter took that site down, or took New York Post down. The way to handle that is to have people to disprove those stories, not the censorship of the story. So when Trump is making that point, he's right. And even going from the standpoint of, it seems like they were trying to protect Biden, again, if it's unequal in regards to what you're doing, then yeah, it looks like it's biased on one side, not the other side. They're going to have the town halls tonight. And I'm curious to see the numbers in regards to the number of people who watch Trump versus the number of people who are watching Biden, because both of them are going on at the exact same time. I, for one, will probably be watching Trump. Because what is Biden going to... He's an inert candidate. It's not... basically, there's nothing Biden is saying. Unless Biden says, I am supporting Medicare for all, and I'm going to push Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer to do the same. Unless he's saying that, there's nothing I need to hear from Joe Biden. That's my litmus test. And if everybody else who backed Medicare for all had that as their litmus test, they would get Medicare for all. It may take a wave in the sense of a number of people who are saying, you get our vote when you represent our interests. But if people did that to the tune of millions, you would have leverage in the political space, and you would get those policies. But people have been so beaten down by the process that they immediately, reflexively go face down, ass up, the moment that their candidate fails in the political process, missing the point that the political process is all sorts of means of interaction or engagement. Voting is just one. Leverage is what you're looking for. And that leverage is found in a population of people who are sick and tired, and who finally make a united, concerted demand for health care. You, at that point, will put the Democrats in a position where they would have to either accept and acquiesce to a policy that 70% of the public backs and 88% of their own party backs, almost unanimity within the context of the party itself, or lose. But understand, instead of acquiescing to a policy during a pandemic, instead of acquiescing to a policy that all of these people support, has so much support in regards to the population in the context of what's going on, they're willing to take it to a man who they call the end of all things. What does that mean for your democracy? And what does that mean for your representative government if your parties don't even represent the interests of the members of the party itself? The party want X, and the other people say, yeah, no, we're not going to do that. And you have to ask, who are they actually representing if these are indeed the policies that they're pushing that are such a distinction from the public itself? And why is the public so beaten down that they've inverted their political process, where instead of having the candidate come, where the candidate goes and gets their votes by advocating for policy that deals with, ameliorates the situation to which they find themselves in regards to their environment. But instead, you throw yourself at the candidate. Throw yourself like he's Jesus, begging for protection. We've inverted our politics. And the reason why we have these horrible trash can candidates is because of that inversion. There are times where your candidate needs to lose. This is not about an issue of party. This is about an issue of policy. And from a standpoint of fighting for policy, yes, that supersedes any notion of just getting any particular person in office. That is the door you have to walk through in order to get your country back. I know a lot of people say it, but at the end of the day, the door that needs to be walked through is facing this notion of you have nowhere else to go and saying, yes, we do. We're fighting on behalf of policy, and you will fail if you do not represent our interests. Power concedes nothing without a demand that hasn't changed. I'll leave it here. Like, share, and of course, subscribe. Make sure I don't miss anyone, because I want to get one more in. Oh, no sound. No sound. Jesus, thank you. No sound. Marcus Will, thank you. It's not just the mainstream media. Chomsky talks about the threat. It's not about mainstream media. Chomsky talks about the threat of QAnon conspiracy while ignoring 3 years of Russiagate. Well, yeah, but because I think Chomsky accepts Russiagate, though. To some degree, I think he accepts it. And I think in Chomsky's head, he looks at this and says, Donald Trump could end the world. Like, our country, we consider ourselves a representative government, or for the matter, democracy. But keep in mind, what props that up? What actually holds that on this axis? What keeps that ticking around in the way that it ticks around? Just us. Nothing. It's not real. It's just a conceptual device. We float around it to such a degree it feels like it's solid, but it's not. All of us have this thing in our head about what that thing is, what that thing means, how we relate to it, etc., etc. But at the end of the day, it's not real. It's just a thought thing. The reason why I say that is the moment that you realize that these are thought things, and you realize these things aren't real, there's a certain degree to which you can push within that system. And in that push, you can get an advantage. Now, if you guys start off on a level playing field where people try to be ethical and earnest and moral, etc., in the way that we consider those things, then fair enough. But we didn't start off that way. That wasn't the playing field to which we started off. We started off on an uneven playing field. And it seemed to get progressively worse. You have people in the parties who are not functioning in the highest interests of America, which is supposed to be this thing that we orient ourselves around, meaning the rule set to which we function. They are functioning in their interests of power and using the rule set of America to do so. Both parties, not just one. Think about this election for the moment. Nearly 80% of Democrats are voting for Joe Biden because he is not Trump. And this is in the context of a pandemic. This is in the context of an eviction crisis. This is in the context of 200,000 people dead, with 300,000 expected to be dead by Christmas, not to mention the number of people who are having all of these additional medical bills and everything else. And you can't even get an affirmative candidate. Understand what I'm saying? You don't have control of your governmental device. This edifice has been lost in some kind of way over the years, as one election after the next, there was no ability to say no and to let them fail. And at that point, you become impervious to disaster. And so the left vote ceased to matter. The black vote ceased to matter. So despite the fact that both of these groups have plenty of things that they dovetail and agree on, they have no power within the context of the party. So much so, and so flagrant, that the DNC convention has Republicans taking swipes at the left. look, I know you may not like me saying that. The goal of this is not necessarily to get Trump elected. The goal of this, more so, is to assert power that's there, that's latent, that's in potential, that just need to be made kinetic. And unfortunately, this particular year, 2020, was the election where we could see that these ideas were popular. And not just popular, that the majority of the public supported many of these ideas, and as a tip of a spear, could have been used to negotiate, or at the very least to try to get a policy across the board. My point is that the moment you get 88% of Democrats backing a policy, or 70%, or whatever, and you get these particular policy points, pick three and push. Pick three and push. Millions, pick three and push, especially if it's three that the society itself agrees upon. And take the framing of the argument. If Donald Trump is indeed a maniac, if Donald Trump is indeed going to end all things, are you really going to risk ending it all, as opposed to appropriating policy that the majority of the public supports, and continuously make that case? I mean, this is not a situation of us failing America. This is a situation of a party failing not just the base of the party, but the country itself. If a party is not willing to appropriate a policy that the overwhelming majority of the public supports in order to stop somebody that they consider to be the end of America, what does it mean about America in and of itself if that's true? And that's something that, for whatever reason, people don't want to deal with. This should have been the season where all of these lefty groups, all of these lefty organizations should have, in one voice, you get our vote when you represent our interests. We don't give a shit that Bernie Sanders failed. That has nothing to do with us. We're here for policy, not the party. And stood there, screaming the exact same thing. Every time somebody talked to you, say that. Every time somebody mentions Donald Trump winning, say, well, hey, Donald Trump doesn't have to win. Joe Biden can appropriate a policy that the majority of the country agrees with, and that this isn't a pandemic it needs. And it's a shame that you accept this notion of a hostage situation where he's putting Trump gun to your head on this. At the end of the day, the Democratic Party, it is the public saying, this is what we want. And it is the party letting that public down. And you have to ask why and for who. Who are their constituents? If they can so casually blow off all of these policy positions that the American public, not just their party, wants. Yeah. And I think that might have been the last one. Oh, wait. George Amelson. Thank you, man. I appreciate it. Here's another one. If we can put 1,000 of low-hanging satellites... Wait a minute. If we could place 1,000 of low-hanging satellites into space, can't we put thousands of large solar reflecting mirrors into space? Has Guy looked into the reflecting thing? So he's basically saying, look, you don't have to do that. I know that was one of the ideas, basically putting up reflecting mirrors to try to reflect some of the heat back into the solar system, back into space, basically. But his point is, look, that's costly. That's a pain in the ass to get up there and to keep it up there. And so it's easier to have those things on the ground and have those things reflecting back. That's his point. I don't buy the proposition that this stuff is an end point at all. I mean, I look at it from the standpoint of we have to get our house in order at some point. And when human skill and acumen is put to bear on that, I think we can find a solution. I mean, the fact that he's working with somebody in and of itself gets across that there are people working on the issue and that there's a potential to try to resolve it. So I don't take it as a flat fact by no measure. I don't even take the extremes. I take it as just the point of view. And that point of view could be right or that point of view could be wrong. I take it as neither. That's the way I look at it. And Susan W., thank you, Susan W. Brent McKinney, thank you, Brent McKinney. Marcus Will, of course, always. And Jorg Asserman. Thank you. I appreciate it, guys. Like I said, I've been trying to kind of make my comeback and get my channel back up to running. So you will be seeing me around a lot more. These videos, for some reason, have gotten longer. I think it's because I'm hanging out with the audience a little bit longer than I used to when I was trying to get the videos in. But I'll leave it here. Like, share, and of course, subscribe.